Hello! Welcome back to Drunk Storytime with Quefish. I am Quefish. I'm in that kind of mood. So, I'm in the mood to just actually drink and not be all fussy. So, anyway. So, first on the docket this evening, there is a new prompt fic that I found. This one is by Blue Sparkle, and it is called Unfortunate Occurrences. I'm not sure how many of the chapters I will get to read. I might do 2 videos of this, but I really highly recommend, no matter how many I get through, to go and check out the rest of all of the chapters, because I've read like the first one and maybe like a paragraph of the second one, and that's when I was like, yeah, I gotta read these. So this is Unfortunate Occurrences. These are teen and up by Blue Sparkle, a collection of cracky one-shots based on weekly prompts from the, oh, and I'm gonna be burpy. Beer makes me burpy. The not very nice and anatomically inaccurate prophecies of Oh Lord, Heal This Server. This first one, I am an absolute sucker for outsider point of view. I mean, okay, technically I'm a sucker for everything. That's actually something that I brought up a number of times, is, you know, anybody can literally put anything having to do specifically with Aziraphale Crowley, and they can go, oh my gosh, I love this kind of Crowley, and I'm like, yes, I fucking love that Crowley. And then somebody can come in and say the exact opposite, and they're like, I love this opposite Crowley, and I'm like, yes, I love that Crowley, because I love it all. It is all my jam. And I really don't care what it is. I love first person point of view. I love third person. I love omniscient. I love outsider point of view. Outsider point of view has a very unique flavor to it that I really enjoy. But so this one is an outsider point of view. It is called Unseen and Unheard. Jenkins prided himself in being a good butler. He had over 4 decades of experience, mostly working for diplomats and extremely rich people who fancied themselves classy nobility of old. Never once had anyone been dissatisfied with his job, the way he handled the household and oversaw the staff's comings and goings. In the past 10 years, he had lived with the Dowlings, Americans, but nevertheless appreciative of his classic approach to his job. That is, they appreciated the results, as he barely ever was consulted or even noticed unless the lady of the house had very specific requirements for a party or such matters. But that was all right. Jenkins didn't need praise for his professional work. He firmly believed that a good butler shouldn't be seen or heard unless summoned and spoken to. His presence should only be felt in the impeccable effortlessness of the house. He was good at not being seen as he worked and inspected everything, making sure that the occupants of the house never felt bothered by him. He was good at memorizing habits and avoided any room that might be in use. You know, I don't know that I ever actually knew what a butler was based on this description. Because every time that you see a butler in like a movie or a television show, they're always like really apparent. They're always like right there, doing something, and yes, and may I take your coat, and stuff like that. So based on that, maybe I don't know what a butler is. This philosophy didn't extend to the staff, of course. He was their boss in some ways, the voice that carried the Dowlings' wishes to the underlings to convey what needed to be done. Jenkins had always been quiet, and despite his age and not particularly lithe stature, he walked near soundlessly. He knew the staff didn't notice him. More than once did he run into maids chatting and giggling rather than doing their work, startling every time they noticed the butler walking in on their break, and blushing as they wondered if he'd overheard something private. The gardener would occasionally be in the kitchen as Jenkins walked in, taking the tartan lunchbox that inexplicably was in the staff's own kitchen, rather than the gardener's cottage, only to flinch and nearly drop it when he spotted the butler. I know that they're not omniscient, but it always makes me laugh when they get snuck up on. Sometimes Jenkins would walk past the security guards, relaxed and smoking, and definitely not doing a very good job, as they didn't even notice him. Heavens, even the severe and ever-vigilant nanny was caught off guard by Jenkins, humming some sweet melody as she lovingly prepared a meal to pack into a tartan lunchbox. That time she had frozen and not moved a muscle until Jenkins left again, apparently thinking he wouldn't see her if she just stood still enough. The butler's vision is affected by movement. That was all right. It wasn't a butler's place to share anyone's secrets. Even when he spotted behavior that was detrimental to the job being done well, Jenkins would always first discuss it in private rather than go and tell their bosses about this. The worst thing, though, was that people seemed to forget about Jenkins altogether. He was quiet, he was unassuming. The door to his own room was set in the wall in such a way that one just forgot it was there, unless one walked all the way down the hallway. And Miss Ashtoreth, who lived in the room right next to his, never did. Lying awake just a little before midnight, Jenkins stared at the ceiling. It was a pain to know habits and schedules, but this one was hard to avoid taking notice of. He glanced towards the wall opposite his bed, hoping that maybe this night wouldn't be as most this week. A dull thud and soft moan let him know that he was out of luck. The wall muffled the sounds somewhat, but the mistakable sound of very vigorous and passionate lovemaking still reached Jenkins against his will. The voices of the unapproachable nanny and the prim and proper gardener were unmistakable every night. It was different each time, but the cries were still there at least once a week around this time. "Oh!" Jenkins heard Brother Francis cry out, loud enough that he knew those two weren't even trying to be quiet. "Harder, darling. Oh." "Yeah, you like that, don't you?" Ashtoreth's voice answered. The thudding happened again, along with Francis's voice accompanying each thrust. Something smacked on the other side of the wall, followed by Francis crying out, and then both of them giggling. Jenkins sighed and pulled a pillow over his head. Perhaps one day he would figure out how to casually remind Nanny Ashtoreth of the shared wall of their room. Until then, he would be quiet and suffer this indignity in silence. Gosh, I love it. This poor, prim, proper butler having to listen to Nanny and Francis's fuck sounds. So this is chapter 2, called These Are the Voyages. The prompt is travel. And the summary is, Crowley tries to arrange for a romantic sea voyage with Aziraphale, but forgets to account for how seasick he'll be. You'll like it, Crowley promised as he strode after Aziraphale, who had his arms full of manuscripts and parcels, and was hurrying along, the mud of the street miraculously avoiding his stockings. Neither of us have been on the other side of the Atlantic for a while. Do you even remember when we... 1224, yes, I know. We had that delightful young woman make us spiced drinks before you went and spooked the neighbors. See? Don't you want to see the ocean again as well? Aziraphale turned up his nose as he paused in front of his current lodgings. He threw Crowley a look, lips turned down in a pout. Oh, I don't know. The longest I've ever been on a ship was that time during the... Oh boy. Ptolemaic era? And I cannot say I enjoyed it. Crowley waved him off easily. Humans have come a long way since then. Ships have improved significantly, and it can even be a bit of a luxury to travel. They looked at each other for a moment, Aziraphale not fully convinced yet, and Crowley waiting a beat before he grinned. And think about it. There'll be pineapples straight from the source. When's the last time you had one of those completely fresh? At this, Crowley knew he had his angel. Aziraphale's eyes went distant for a moment as he reminisced about whatever lovely occasions he'd gotten to try one of the fruits last. They were a little hard to get in England, and while money wasn't a problem, Crowley knew that Aziraphale did prefer them freshly picked. Oh, I suppose it wouldn't hurt to expand my area of work for a while, he said slowly. And we both would be on the ship as scientific advisors, you say? You'll get no questions about bringing books that way. Well then, I will let you arrange our travels then. It had been the perfect plan as far as Crowley was concerned. He had vague orders to cause some ruckus in the fleets of the world, maybe inspire a mutiny or two, while Aziraphale had mentioned something about helping humans improve the conditions of new cities. They could reasonably go and do their work in what the locals called the New World. A sea voyage was perhaps the most romantic and sexually charged thing Crowley could come up with, too. Months and months of gorgeous solitude, nothing but the oceans around them and the occasional stops on unknown islands and tropical cities. Sunsets over the endless horizons, painting the waves crimson as they drank wine and good liquor. A cabin shared by just the two of them, narrow space and perhaps a small bed for two, forced closeness and sexually charged proximity. Aziraphale would bat his lashes coquettishly and sigh over how they really shouldn't, but if the angel wanted Crowley, he'd have an excuse for a momentary weakness. If anything was ever going to happen, a wondrous sea adventure was exactly the place to try. Crowley arranged everything, finding a ship that was quite a lot bigger than most of the ones docked in the Thames, clean and with a nice cabin to share. Aziraphale's books were brought on, as well as both their luggage, and a few items Crowley supposed would suit a scientist, tools to chart the stars and maps. The cabin had a little window that would provide wonderful mood lighting during sunsets. And while there was a hammock, the bed was small, but not too much so. It would be quite the charged atmosphere. Aziraphale was pleased as well, enjoying the ship and introducing himself to every single sailor before their voyage began. He was in a far better mood than Crowley had anticipated. The ship sailed down the river, and the demon couldn't help but imagine all of the wonderful ways he could put on a show for Aziraphale. Swaying down the deck with a seductive swing of his hips, comforting Aziraphale through rough weather, and playing the part of the charming swashbuckler, making sure his angel was comfortable during the days as Crowley helped him get used to the sea. It was perfect. The best plan he'd ever made. The plan that quickly went overboard as their ship left the calm waters of the Thames and made its way through the Channel and towards the ocean. The comparatively gentle waves of the North Sea quickly changed into true ocean, and everything went downhill from there. "Isn't it marvelous?" Aziraphale cried from his spot against the rails, out of the way and observing the way sunshine made the waves look the most beautiful shade of blue. "I'm so glad you invited me along, my dear." Crowley's grip on the rails was too tight, the wood creaking in protest. He grinned, trying to hide how pale he was. "Wait a minute, I thought Aziraphale was going to be sick." I thought it was going to be Aziraphale. No matter how hard walking along the deck to reach Aziraphale had been torture. No matter how hard he tried, he simply couldn't get used to the way the ground moved under his feet, the way the ship swayed with every wave. How the sailors around them moved about so easily was beyond him, and that Aziraphale had found his sea legs with such ease was frankly unfair. Aziraphale was still looking at him, his smile full of warmth and his eyes reflecting the ocean. If Crowley wasn't so focused on standing upright, he'd probably be over the moon with joy. It didn't stop there. Of course it didn't. Crowley's constant inability to walk normally and keep his balance with ease meant that he couldn't do any impressive feats in front of Aziraphale, couldn't climb up anywhere or show off, could barely walk the deck at all. While Crowley didn't eat, his stomach still felt like it was constantly clenched tight with nausea. And on days the sea felt particularly wild, he was too dizzy to get up. Luckily, Aziraphale just assumed that he wished to sleep and left him to it. It was pure torture. Aziraphale enjoyed all the things Crowley had predicted: the ocean air, the sense of adventure aboard the ship, their little cabin where he took the bed and Crowley took the hammock. I can't imagine a hammock would help seasickness. Or maybe it would. Maybe it would be like one of those, like the bed would have to stay doing whatever the boat did, but the hammock potentially would be able to stay more still. I don't remember what the word is called, but where, because that is already able to move, it would be able to move to stay in the same spot while the boat moved around it. Things I never thought I'd think about. Their little cabin where he took the bed and Crowley took the hammock. Their evenings of peace and drinking, when Crowley could stomach it. The proximity, the promise of their destination. The night it happened, Crowley felt as if someone had taken his other shape by the tail and swung him around several times. He could barely focus on anything besides his misery and the way the ship swayed more than usual. Rain drummed against the thick glass window of their cabin in the way Aziraphale found quite pleasing. As Crowley wondered how he'd get up into his hammock to sleep until it was over, Aziraphale apparently decided it was time to become more amorous. Oh my God. Is he going to puke during their first kiss? Oh, that would be so sad. Say, my dear, Don't you wish for a more comfortable bed? Aziraphale asked, running his hand over the bed sheets. He was already dressed in a nightgown, a sight that would have had Crowley out of his mind back on land. Wouldn't you join me? I do not need to sleep, as you know, so I'll make room for you easily. Crowley threw a look over his shoulder, saw Aziraphale's eyes shining with intent, and knew that he was doomed. He stood from the chair at the desk, half stumbling, half falling towards the bed, and dropping down near Aziraphale with far less grace than he wanted. Aziraphale's pleased little smile was worth the way his vision blurred, obviously, as was the soft touch of fingers against his cheek, of course. I'm so glad we're here together, Aziraphale whispered, close enough for his breath to ghost against Crowley's lips. This has been quite wonderful, my darling. Crowley stared, his heart beating faster, the room spinning before his eyes, and Aziraphale was leaning in, a pretty blush dusting his cheeks. Crowley's stomach clenched in protest. No! Crowley's stomach clenched in protest, and he was about to kiss the love of his... With a jagged motion, Crowley was on his feet, tearing free from Aziraphale. God, I can't even say it. With a jagged motion, Crowley was on his feet, tearing free from Aziraphale's gentle hold, and he was running out of the cabin as fast as his treacherous legs could carry him. By the time Crowley had regained some sense of balance and let the air settle his frayed nerves, he was completely drenched in sea and rainwater. He stumbled back into the cabin, finding Aziraphale still in the bed, with the sheets drawn over his lap and a book in his hands. Crowley nearly bolted again, but Aziraphale merely looked up and cooed in sympathy. You poor darling, he said, beckoning Crowley closer. Why didn't you say that the sea was making you sick? Didn't want you to worry, Crowley muttered, though they both knew it was about his image. Aziraphale patted the bed again, and Crowley hesitated only for a moment before joining him. At once, Aziraphale pulled him in so he was lying comfortably with his head rested on the angel's lap. The air cracked, and Crowley found himself covered by the softest downy feathers, the brush of angelic wings easing his nausea at once. There, doesn't this feel better? Aziraphale asked, running his hand through Crowley's wind-tangled hair. Rest, darling. I'm sure you'll feel much better once we reach land. Crowley thought of the weeks still ahead of them and made a distressed noise. Angel? Yes? When we go back, we're flying. It really was a sign of true love that Crowley didn't complain at Aziraphale's laughter. Oh, poor Crowley. I really thought it was going to be Aziraphale that got sick. Oh. Oh man, so that was chapters 1 and 2 of Unfortunate Occurrences. I think I'm going to do a couple more in the next video. But like I said, please go to the story on AO3. Link will be in the description. Give the author some love, please. So, thank you very much for joining me, and I will see you next time.